Hi, this is David Griffith, editor of Police Magazine, and I am here presenting the Police Coffee Break with Dave Smith, who is a veteran of Arizona law enforcement, the creator of the J.D. Buck Savage training videos, an internationally recognized law enforcement trainer, and the monthly author of a column for Police Magazine. Ever since the fatal shooting of Daunte Wright at a traffic stop in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, officers and the public have asked what happened. How could a veteran officer mistake her pistol for a taser? In this first episode of Police Coffee Break, we asked that question of Dave Smith. Dave, what do you think happened in the Daunte Wright shooting?
This is one of those issues that we've looked at for years. Ever since we got tasers, we've had the rare but tragic incidents of officers thinking, or a better word is say intending to deploy a taser and instead shooting a subject. Now, usually it was non-fatal, but when it is fatal, it's high profile, like the BART shooting years ago. And this is the thing, when you study human performance under stress, it's so easy to flippantly say, well, she was just incompetent. He was just incompetent. Well, that word doesn't solve our problems, especially for us trainers who want to figure out how do we avoid this happening. So when you have this officer under extreme stress, and this is the thing to remember, they're dealing, this Daunte fellow has got warrants for him. He's got priors with a weapon. So you don't know, you haven't searched the vehicle. You're just getting him out. Your officer that takes him out puts him against the door right there, and then in an active roadway, by the way, which is never a good tactic, and not to be too critical of this, but the technique itself appears poor and weak in the cuffing. So you have the officer who ends up shooting the suspect in this case. She apparently has decided mentally to tase him as he's attempting to drive off. The trouble is, what her intention was and what her brain chose to do were two different things. And this is where you get this slip and capture concept. This kills pilots as well. So a lot of this research actually comes from aviation research in the fatalities of aviation. And very often the pilots who are killed by this are not incompetents at all, but very veteran pilots who make pilot error. And she, in essence, did the operator error, grabbed the wrong instrument thinking it was one, and then discharged a round into the suspect. Now, this isn't, we do slip and capture errors in our lives in various events. It can be where you mean to do something and you grab the other thing. Part of it's based on habit. Think how many times, all you listening, have ever drawn and used your taser under stress versus all the times you've drawn your weapon, which is going to be tens of thousands to one. And that's the thing. Citizens have to understand that once we learn something to an automatic level, it's essentially a habit. Right? I feel stress. I'm threatened. I'm going to take my gun out. I'm in fear of my life. I'm in fear of your life. These are the kind of things that we have to understand when you study human performance.
We're hearing a lot of discussion about this slip and capture phenomenon. I guess that's proper to call it a phenomenon. What exactly is that, and how does it actually affect officers?
Well, when I first read it, it was in a book called Human Error by an English researcher, Professor James Reason. And what Dr. Reason had found is that what has happened is the brain will, under stress, when you give it an intention, I intend to do this. But there is another program in your brain, we call it your motor program, learned to a much higher level. For instance, let's say in this case, how many repetitions had she done with her taser? I don't know. The chief said they trained with their taser once a year. Does that mean they practiced drawing it under stress? I don't know. I don't know what their repetitions were. But I guarantee you they qualified many times a year. And not just that, you and I both know we don't really record how often we draw our firearm. But as a young officer, I know in the streets of Tucson, I had my firearm out a lot under pressure, under stress. We were one of the top cities in crime at that time. And everyone has a gun in Tucson, and still do to this day. And That's part of being in a free society, but it also means part of getting it in your hand a lot. And these are the things we have to understand, is that under stress, glitches happen in our brain. And this slip and capture is just one of the kinds of mistakes that our brain can make. We always say that to err is human, yet we want to be totally unforgiving when somebody actually errs. I don't believe in this officer's case there's any malice whatsoever. I think it's just the opposite. I think she's under tremendous stress. She's the FTO monitoring her trainee. The things aren't going well. The cuffing's not going very well. They have this warrant, and then all of a sudden, this is resisting is going on, and bang, a horrible tragedy occurs. It ruins his life. It ruins her life, and it brings up all these calls for reform without any kind of real rational debate about what's going on. In this area, I don't know all the ways we might prevent it: repetition, additional repetitions, altering the way a taser is deployed. But again, it's designed for facility. The closer something is to a motor program I already have, the quicker it is I learn it. Dissociative theory of learning. So there was a lot of logic to making a taser like a handgun. The problem is when something like this happens, suddenly an unintended consequence occurs, a risk that we had not anticipated. Now we're all scampering around trying to blame. Well, it's solved. There's nothing to blame. It's a well-designed instrument. It saved tens of thousands of suspect lives and hundreds of cops. So it's got a few failures. Let's learn how to use it more effectively instead of running around blaming. That's one of the problems I find in our society too often. We want people to have anticipated something I just could not have anticipated. That's called engineering, by the way.
So slip and capture is not a thing about losing focus. It's more that you have done an operation, for example, drawing your pistol, much more often than drawing your taser, and it's kind of a muscle memory thing. Is that right?
Yeah, there's no muscle memory is a physiological response. Like if you break your arm, your muscles will rebound very quickly after you get well. That's muscle memory. What this is really might be called better spinal tuning. I practice, I do enough repetitions where whatever the skill I'm learning, it is learned to what motor learning scientists would call it to an unconscious level, an automatic level. In other words, it's an automatic stimulus response. Whoa, I feel threatened. All right, let's draw my weapon. It's really one of those things where I have an intent. In this case, like I said, she intends to draw her taser, but the more learned motor program, the automatic program, is so unconscious that it draws that. Where this really happens a lot is when you're exchanging between one threat and the other. You're going, oh my gosh, this is not a deadly, now this is a physical confrontation. I need to de-escalate. And, you're changing weapon systems, these kind of things. But if you have conscious thought, cognitive thought, it slows you down. Cognitive thought interferes with a well-learned skill. Well, cognitive thought leads to clutching. The last thing you want your basketball player when they come up to the free throw line on a penalty is to think about the program of shooting. That's all automatic. They need to focus on the goal, putting the ball through that hoop up there, and just focus on the intent, not the skill itself. Because that's what motor scientists would say. That would interfere. That intentionality would interfere with a well-learned motor program. Changing the design of the taser may work, as long as it doesn't make it easier to be disarmed from us. At the same time, though, you've got a tool that's been very, very effective for a long time. And maybe this will cause us to come up with more tools. I don't know. This is the time when it's a learning event for everyone. It shouldn't be a blaming event.
Well, we hear a lot about placement of the taser, weak hand side, versus the duty pistol on the strong side. And in this case, reportedly, that was the way that the weapons are configured on the Brooklyn Center officers' belts. Is there any other position they could do, like maybe lower on the leg, that would force you to reach farther for the taser, that would do away with the slip and capture concept?
Well, we'd have to study that. Again, this is the kind of thing where how much more different in terms of your attentional pattern than to put it on the opposite side of your handgun. I mean, all logic, which again, logic isn't necessarily, logic's based on the knowledge I have today, not what I will discover later. But, looks to me like Brooklyn Center did everything, they train regularly, again, at a time when defunding is leading to the first thing we're losing is training and all those outreach programs everybody says they want, then they're cutting our budgets. But I don't know what the chief comes out. The city manager says what they should say, and they both are gone today. Again, none of this is rational, and the questions you're asking are important. We've never done an ergonomic study. I don't think that I've heard of as the optimal way, but I think that we've all said, well, let's make sure we keep it away from the firearm so this confusion doesn't occur. And the question is was it confusion or the brain latching on, slipping away from the intention and capturing a more intensely learned motor program and running that program out of a habit? And that's the best way to look at it. Well-trained programs are essentially your habit. I have a stimulus, a response. And the better I train that skill, everybody says, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. That's exactly right. This is why practice is so important, that we do the right technique, that we do the right skill program. But repetitions are still pretty essential to make any skill a habit or an automatic skill. And we don't do a lot of repetitions with that taser. That's simply, be honest. We need to practice our repetitions. You almost never go out and practice dry firing your taser. You don't go out, and it's a relatively new tool. And frankly, this is an important part for us now, instead of blame, but to learn, to study. The guy that created the stress in this situation isn't the officer, and she responded to a high stress situation with an error, literally a glitch in her program. And that's where we need to start from, instead of busy, trying to give attribution to different moral slips in society that have nothing to do with this problem.
If you were an officer working on the street, carrying both a firearm and a taser on your belt, what would you do to prevent this from happening to you? What can these officers do?
Well, I tell you what I would have them do. I would have them mentally rehearse transitioning, mentally rehearse. One of the things officers have to remember when we talk about crisis rehearsal or mental rehearsal, you are actually programming yourself. I mean, that is a training effect. So mentally rehearse, drawing your taser, practice transitioning. Again, this is the kind of thing, I don't expect you to look down. In fact, one of the things a good officer safety trainer always teaches is do your skills without looking. One of our first keys of controlling a threat is to visually control that threat. And if you're down looking for your flashlight in the traffic stop, if you're down looking for your baton, or you're looking for whatever you're looking for, your has can, you're not paying attention to where the threat's not down there in that patrol vehicle. The threat's not down there on your belt. The threat's not strapped to your leg. The threat's in front of you. So practice doing these things by the Braille technique, as we say. And the thing is that right now, as we're studying this, and you've got groups out there like Force Science and others that are going to do studies on this more, and I'm assuming you're going to see some academics get involved in this as well, trying to understand this phenomenon a little better. So for you listening that are actively out there, on the streets, just do mental rehearsal, then physically practice drawing, again, replace, draw, and practice these things. Just again, I want you to habitually be able to draw. In other words, have the intention, and it gets in, I don't want you to have to think about, I got 3 steps with this holster. No, I want you to say, okay, I need my gun. Oh, it's in my hand. This is the kind of thing I want you to be able to do with your taser as well. I need my taser. Oh, it's in my hand. Let's try to balance our repetitions. It's a good question, Dave.
Well, Dave, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate your coming on, discussing this with us. I want to thank the audience for listening, and we will be producing more of these Police Coffee Break podcasts. Thank you.